Erasing the Ether. For thousands of years, some of the greatest minds in history believed there was a subtle medium throughout the universe which facilitated the transmission of light and electromagnetic radiation. This subtle medium was known as the ether, also referred to as the fifth element, quintessence, dark energy, prana, akasha, and the breath of the gods. Plato referred to the ether as the most translucent kind of air, and implies its role in the cosmos, suggesting that it serves as a medium connecting the material world with the realm of the eternal forms or ideas. This connection highlights the ancient Greek belief in the interconnectedness of existence, where ether acts as a bridge between higher realities and sensory experience. All matter comes from a primary substance, the luminiferous ether. Throughout the infinite, the forces are in a perfect balance, and hence the energy of a single thought may determine the motion of the universe. If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. My brain is only a receiver. In the universe, there is a core from which we obtain knowledge, strength, and inspiration. I have not penetrated into the secret of this core, but I know it exists. The day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in 1 decade than in the previous centuries of its existence. The ether, invented by Isaac Newton, reinvented by James Clerk Maxwell, this is the stuff that fills up the space of the universe. Discredited and discarded by Einstein, the ether is now making a comeback. It's really the vacuum, but burdened by theoretical ghostly particles. Due to the subtlety of the ether, it was not easy to measure, making it extremely difficult to disprove. Throughout the 19th century, a cult of materialists tried to dominate social discourse with their atheistic and materialistic view of reality. There were 2 camps, 2 postulates for the explanation of reality. There were the atomists, the materialists, who insisted on measuring and quantifying everything. If it could not be measured, in their view, it did not exist. The other camp were the etherists, who saw life, the universe, and everything as a reciprocating conscious interaction with divine spirit through the subtle medium of the ether. The problem science and scientists had was explaining how light travelled through the vacuum of space. This was their greatest dilemma and the key to unlocking the mysteries of this reality. The creationists held firm, believing that the ether was a form of spiritual conscious soup, connecting human consciousness with higher dimensions of infinite potential and divinity. The material atheists, wishing to quantify everything, needed to remove any semblance of spiritual thinking from the puzzle. If they could not measure it, it did not exist. Around the same time, the middle of the 19th century, the materialists funded their atheistic and material view of the world, determined to undermine the creationists. The eradication of the ether was part of that agenda. In 1859, Charles Darwin, although not an atheist, published his famous book on the origin of species, promoted by the materialists because it gave an alternative explanation to life on Earth as opposed to the creationists. Karl Marx, the author of the Communist Manifesto, developed the theory of dialectic materialism, basing his theory on the Hegelian dialectic, but dismissing any external conscious influence to ideas, concepts, or mental constructs. Marx's material dialectic dismissed the ether and any form of spiritual insights. Atheism, the belief that there was nothing, and nothing happened to nothing, and then nothing magically exploded for no reason, creating everything, and then a bunch of everything magically rearranged itself for no reason whatsoever into self-replicating bits, which turned into dinosaurs. The etherists had a strong case, explaining the passage of light through the vacuum of space. Their explanation was simple, logical, and an extension of what had been understood and proven for explaining the passage of sound through the air. When sound is generated from a source, nothing physical is being emitted. When we talk, we set up disturbances in the medium of air, nitrogen and oxygen. Perturbations or agitations are created in the air. These perturbations generate sound waves and refractions. These waves will travel and eventually weaken and dissipate. Any device capable of detecting these disturbances, either mechanical or biological, can decipher the sound generated. The same concept can be seen when a person stands in a lake and splashes their arms and hands into the water. Disturbances are generated in the medium of water. Again, nothing is being emitted. The action of the person sets up waves which can be detected at the shoreline. This basic concept can be extrapolated out to explain visible light and all other electromagnetic radiation of varying frequencies, from gamma rays to radio waves. In the early days of radio, a transmitter would transmit electromagnetic radiation as a disturbance into the ether, typically with frequencies less than 300 gigahertz and wavelength greater than 1 millimeter. The receiver would tune into this specific frequency and detect the disturbance within the ether. Even today, we use the term Ethernet. The present broadcasting station does not propagate Hertzian waves, but acts more like an ether whistle, transmitting waves through the ether, similar to the waves transmitted by an ordinary whistle through the air. All forms of electromagnetic radiation are disturbances within the ether, a perturbation modality by which the electromagnetic radiation travels. Light is no different, as part of the EMR spectrum. Nothing is being emitted. However, the speed of the propagation within the etheric disturbance will depend upon the density of the ether. For example, water and glass may reduce the speed by 30%. Therefore, A light bulb is not emitting anything. There are no particles being emitted. Just like the source of a sound wave, the bulb sets up a disturbance in the ether. Light cannot be anything else but a longitudinal disturbance in the ether, involving alternate compression and refractions. In other words, light can be nothing else other than a sound wave in the ether. Because the concept of an ether was poetically simple and ran in tune with nature, the materialists, setting about trying to undermine and disprove its existence, and being subtle, made it extremely difficult. In 1887, Albert Abraham Michelson, a Polish-born Jew, teamed up with Edward William Morley to disprove the existence of the ether with their famous Michelson-Morley experiment. In the experiment, they attempted to measure the motion of the Earth relative to the luminiferous ether, a supposed medium permeating space that was thought to be the carrier of light waves. The experiment compared the speed of light in perpendicular directions in an attempt to detect the relative motion, including their laboratory, through the luminiferous ether, or ether wind as it was sometimes called. The result was negative, finding no significant difference between the speed of light in the direction of movement through the presumed ether and the speed at right angles. This result is generally considered to be the first strong evidence against some ether theories, as well as initiating a line of research that eventually led to special relativity, which rules out motion against an ether. Of this experiment, Albert Einstein wrote, "If the Michelson-Morley experiment had not brought us into serious embarrassment, no one would have regarded the relativity theory as a halfway redemption." Armed with the results of the experiment to disprove the existence of an ether, the materialists could now set about promoting an alternative. As the 20th century progressed, the scientific community largely abandoned the ether theory in favor of Einstein's theory of special relativity, which posited that light does not require a medium to propagate, and that the speed of light is constant in a vacuum. The Michelson-Morley experiment, which attempted to detect the motion of the Earth through the ether and found no evidence of such a medium, further undermined the ether theory. Despite this, Tesla remained steadfast in his belief in the ether until his death in 1943. He rejected the new developments in theoretical physics, including Einstein's relativity, which he criticized as overly abstract and disconnected from physical reality. Tesla believed that the ether was essential for understanding the true nature of the universe, and that its abandonment was a step backwards for science. If the ether is a subtle medium comprising of attributes of infinite potential within divine consciousness, its mass may therefore be undetectable. Just because the quantumists have no measurement for an ether does not mean that it does not exist. They neither have a means to measure or quantify the love they have for their mothers, but they will all agree that this love exists. Einstein's theory of relativity had to be based purely on Saturnian and material principles. Space and time is essentially the materium within the constraints of time, Chronos or Saturn. Using abstract mathematical concepts and virtual particles, the materialists tried to explain life, the universe, and everything, instead of explaining the simplistic beauty of nature. They baffled everyone with an array of virtual concepts relating only to their virtual reality. Today's scientists have substituted mathematics for experiments, and they wander off through equation after equation and eventually build a structure which has no relation to reality. Einstein's relativity work is a magnificent mathematical garb which fascinates, dazzles, and makes people blind to the underlying errors. The theory is like a beggar clothed in purple, whom ignorant people take for a king. Its exponents are brilliant men, but they are metaphysicians rather than scientists. No theory could explain the workings of the universe without recognizing the existence of the ether and the indispensable function it plays in phenomena. There is something frightening about the universe when we consider that only our senses of sound and light make it beautiful. The universe is darker than the darkest ink, colder than the coldest ice, and more silent than a silent tomb. Sight and sound are only avenues through which we can perceive it all. There is a third sense, which we have failed to discover. What then can light be, if not a transverse vibration? I consider this extremely important. Light cannot be anything but a longitudinal disturbance in the ether, involving alternating compressions and refractions. Light can be nothing else than a sound wave in the ether. In ancient Kabbalah, the crown Sephirot is known as Keter, ether with the K removed. This Sephirot symbolizes the divine will and the initial impulse towards creation or infinite source. It represents pure consciousness and transcends human understanding, often referred to as hidden light. Keter is associated with the divine I am that I am. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light.